All right, I think live. My name
All
is
right.
Michelle Parker, and I'm a professional skier and a member of the Protect Our Winners Riders Alliance. And I'm very excited to be here today with our guest, Auden Schendler. And Auden, you are the Vice President of Sustainability at Aspen Skiing Company, and you've written a book among many other things. But can you talk about the impacts from this virus and the similarities when you're considering the projections for warming winters in your business?
Yeah, good to see you, Michelle. And what we've talked about in the ski industry around climate change over many years has been the risk that it would get so hot that you'd lose the last 2 weeks in March. And if anyone was at the World Cup races here a few years ago, World Cup finals, the base of Aspen Mountain was a swimming pool, and the course had to be salted heavily, and races had to be done very quickly because it was 60 or 70 degrees out. And the ski industry is weird. If you lose the last 2 weeks in March, you basically go out of business, because the way the industry works is you spend all this ridiculous amount of money in the summer. You're replacing lifts and buildings and roofs and so forth. And then you make your profit in the winter. And by the end of March, you're starting to make pure profit. And that's money that you can use to pay bonuses and 401k and capital expense. So I've always said, hey, if that goes away, we're in trouble. Well, it went away. The timing of Corona, if it had been 2 weeks later, the ski industry would have had one of the greatest economic years of its history. And instead, it was crippling. I mean, we're privately held. You can look at say, Vail Resorts' books, but we got destroyed. And we had to make these horrible decisions about, do you not lay off, which we didn't, and then you pay people an extra 2 weeks, and that eats up, tens of millions of dollars. So in a way, it's like a dry run for climate change, because you lose March. And if you lost a little bit on the other end, December, then you're out of business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that the profits really started to kick in come March. I've noticed here in Tahoe, there's been a lot less freezing nights, and we've lost that amazing California corn snow as much as we used to have it in the past anyways. So our winters here are definitely getting a little bit noticeably shorter. But yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think
And
it's kind
Michelle,
of
that's not just, you're saying you're observing that, but there's science behind that. The data show that you are seeing warmer nights and that the snow line in Tahoe is going up.
big time? It's noticeable. It breaks my heart. So yeah, this is kind of basically like a dry run for what the future might hold if we don't take drastic measures to help out with climate change.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, so this was an economic dry run, but climate change is going to bring heat in addition to, hey, you have to shut the whole business down. It's heat. It's lack of water availability. It's interestingly lack of success at small hometown resorts that are at low elevation, like Hidden Valley in New Jersey, that went out of business, where people learn to ski, and then they say, one day I'm going to go ski Aspen, one day I'll ski Squaw, one day I'll ski Park City. And so it takes it, climate change itself would be even worse than COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. With all the weather and everything, considering that. And coming back to the here and now, is there an upside to the COVID-19 pandemic? We've seen, you can see the Taj Mahal. Anyone who's alive today in China is breathing the most clear air that they've ever breathed in their entire life. And New York's pollution is down by 50%. Do you think that the world traveling less and reducing our consumption and our emissions have been dropping? Do you think the impacts of climate change are slowing down right now?
So I'm super skeptical of the notion of silver linings to things like global pandemics. And on you're right that the Himalaya are visible from northern India for the first time in decades, and the brown cloud in Denver is gone. I'm sure, Salt Lake City, that has horrible air quality, is seeing the best days of its history. Climate change isn't slowing down, even though there was a new report today that emissions will be down 8% this year. That's amazing. But that doesn't slow climate change, as you know, because CO2 lives for 100 years in the atmosphere, and we've just put so much in there that we're on a warming trend. But to the extent that there are benefits here, it's one, we see what it's like when you don't pollute with traditional pollutants, one, and two, maybe some of the stuff like what we're doing now will stick. So how many meetings have you or I, flown to and been like, boy, am I dumb, I didn't need to fly there. So I think Zoom will take off. I think people will recognize they don't have to travel as much. I think there's some really interesting things going on, like, the fracking industry in the US was kind of teetering on the edge financially. And now between the Saudi-Russia conflict and the fact that nobody's using any gasoline, the price of oil has collapsed, and that industry will never be the same. Now, the renewable energy industry is suffering too, but there are things that we can learn from this.
Yeah, like maybe right now we're getting a glimpse of what's actually possible if we band together as we are during the COVID-19 pandemic for global warming.
Yeah, and let me add, though, that right now we're cutting emissions and pollution, but we're doing it at a tremendous human cost. Where people are unemployed, people are unable to work, people can't feed their families. And that's not the message of the climate fix. The climate fix involves abundant clean energy, abundant jobs. And so it's important to say this is not how we're going to solve it. It's not going to be intense suffering. It's going to be smart policy, good decision making. We're going to deliver the economy and economic success, but just without carbon.
If we are able to put that in motion before it becomes a much greater crisis.
And that's a really important point, which is that right now the government is making decisions about where do you throw your money? You've seen this in the headlines. Do you subsidize the fossil fuel industry, or do you help the renewable power industry? Do big corporations get your money, or do small businesses get your money? So the decisions, and this is why Protect Our Winters is important, is we as an outdoor state, we need to be pushing on these issues right now, like literally today, to make sure the right decisions are put in place. So when we come out of this, we're better off.
Absolutely. And we have a question from the crowd actually right now, speaking of
awesome.
The outdoor state, but why have other resorts not taken action like Aspen?
Specifically, I'm curious what that person is asking. Other resorts have done a lot environmentally on the ground and operationally, meaning things like commitments to zero waste, to clean energy, and so forth. And our gripe, Aspen Ski Company's gripe, and POW's gripe has been that they've done that, but they haven't taken their CEO to Washington, or they haven't written an op-ed in a newspaper saying climate is a paramount issue. They haven't gotten their trade groups to mobilize. And the reason is when you do that, you get criticized, you get attacked, it's difficult. If you're publicly traded like Vail, people say, what are you doing? Just make money, don't work on this climate thing. And so it's difficult for business to hang it out there, stick their necks out, and be political. And unfortunately, that's what's required. And one note I'd make to this group is, if a business you love says, we're recycling and we're greening our supply chain, hold them to account. Say, that's awesome, I'm so glad you're doing it. Has your CEO made a statement on climate? What are you doing to get your trade groups to move? So that's the difference between Aspen, POW, and many of our many other resorts. Note that a lot of our member companies are doing this. Burton's a great example. Patagonia is a great example. North Face is a great example. They are actually hanging it out there.
Absolutely. And there seems to be like a large local pull behind these resorts as well. When you consider Squaw Valley, for example, I know that they pushed Liberty Energy, our energy company, to switch off of coal and get onto renewables because they were like the third biggest customer. So that's an interesting pull that you guys have as well. You're a big customer of these different groups.
Right. And as you know, the city of Park City has moved the entire utility in the region. Not the resort, but the city. They have done some amazing things getting that utility off coal in a very conservative state.
That's very cool. So now that we've seen that change is possible, how do we keep the momentum going?
Yeah. So, I hope people understand what Protect Our Winters is trying to do. And the short answer is that there are a bunch of dirtbags like you and I, outdoor state people who the last thing we ever wanted was to be involved in politics. We just want to, buy a bag of potatoes and live in Yosemite for the summer or live out of your van. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, this is a population that has not been weaponized politically. The NRA has been, but these guys are just sitting in their vans and they're not necessarily voting. They're not politically engaged. They're not educated. I'm making generalizations. Basically, this is an incremental voter group that hasn't been tapped. So the way we make progress is everyone on this call, but everyone in the outdoor community, we need to step up, weaponize ourselves as political actors and get involved in the elections at a federal and state level, but also locally in our communities. And this is, what I was talking about earlier. The government is making policy decisions right now, and we are weighing in. POW is weighing in, but we need your support. We need a little bit of your money. We need your letters to keep making this progress.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, a lot of the times when I talk to people about this through, for example, doing Protect Our Winters Hot Planet Cool Athletes program, where we go around and we speak to the students in the high schools and we talk about climate change and how they can get involved. And a lot of them are left with like, well, my voice doesn't matter. How can my voice matter? And it's just one person, but it's exactly what you're talking about. The outdoor state is 50 million strong in the United States. It would be the biggest state in the United States. And together we can take collective action to move things forward positively.
Right. And it's bigger and more powerful than really any other lobbying group if we weaponize it. And an important answer to that question of where's my power? I'm just a citizen, or I'm just a kid. I think people need to sit down either with a 6-pack of beer or Coke or whatever you want and do what you did, which is say, hey, I'm just an athlete. Where do I have power? Well, it turns out that you have influence and you have sponsors and you can talk about climate when you're on the news. Well, that's you specifically. And I've done the same thing for me. Well, everyone has power. They just have to figure it out. If you're a third grader, you've got power. You just have to figure out how to wield it. Look at Greta, for example.
Big time. Yeah, perfect example. I think that's a lot what Protect Our Winters has helped me do is, gain confidence in my voice and start to understand how I can use it the most effectively, whether if that is me talking to my sponsors, asking them to get on board with Protect Our Winters, or think about the packaging and reducing the packaging by 50% or whatever these things are. Our voice does matter and we do have power, all of us as individuals.
Right, and you see right there how difficult it is. Let's say you're sponsored by Red Bull. Well, it's hard to go to Red Bull. You want them to like you. You want the sponsorship. You don't want to be a pain in the butt, but you go to them and say, hey, Red Bull, you're powerful. We need your voice. Will you come to Washington with us? So there's this play between doing the right thing on climate and maintaining a good relationship with a critical sponsor so you're not eating out of a can for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And that conversation between myself and my sponsors has changed over the past 10 years. I think I've been involved with POW for almost 10 years. It's been a long time. But I remember back in the day of people saying, don't get political. And now my sponsors are like, get political about this issue. Like, we're behind you,
Oh,
which is really cool.
that's incredible. Yeah, I'm actually curious, Michelle, what was it that tipped you into the kind of activism you're doing? I know you're doing more than just POW, but was there a point in your career where you said, it's not just enough to huck this thing and get the stoke. I need something else. Or tell me about that.
Early on, actually, for me, when I was, I've been a professional skier since I was 16. And I remember being 18 and kind of pondering to myself, like, is this really the career path that I want to take? Is this really doing good? Am I adding to the global community, or am I taking away from it and being selfish? And that was a question that I grappled with for a few years, I would say. And then I realized that, like, if by chance I was able to make it in this career path, then I would have influence and I would have a platform, and I could do good with that platform, whether it's, I don't know, I just returned home from delivering food to families in need in my local community, and just small things like that that can blossom into bigger things. Or getting involved with Protect Our Winters was like the easiest one for me to relate to, because as a skier, my eyes are on the weather nonstop, and it was just becoming more and more apparent to me the more education I had and all of that stuff, that we needed a voice in the outdoor industry. And Jeremy Jones being a local hero of mine, I was like, all right, I can get on board with that, and I would love to be involved. And I think that was more of a switch in my personal realization of, like, I could actually be doing a lot of good within my position. And now I see the silver lining, like, you're influencing younger women to want to be outdoors, or men and women alike, there's a lot more to it. But yeah, I think coming to that realization has really sparked my interest in working with POW and doing other things like that.
I also think there's as an athlete, you're a brand in yourself, and I think that fans and filmmakers and sponsors, they're looking for depth of character, depth of brand. And if you're just like, dude, I hucked that thing and it was so sick. There's not that much there. Like, it's awesome, but you're a deeper, POW athletes are this deeper brand and more meaningful part of society.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question from the crowd. Are we going to have to move to Alaska to ski POW in 2050?
What's interesting is that skiing's not going away, but I think you're right that it's going to be harder to access. So Alaska is actually looking not that great in 2050, because it's a lot of coastal ranges, and the coastal ranges don't do that well. But skiing won't go away. You're still going to have these big winter events. In fact, there was another article I was reading today about, and many of you know this, that you may have colder winters with big blizzards because of climate change, and there's science behind that. But you'd have a compressed season. So you'll still be able to find snow, but the issue is, you don't want it to be a situation where you have to go to Jackson or to Aspen to ski, and you can't ski anywhere else, because all of you here on this call know that the soul of the sport is in the small mom and pop low elevation resorts where you learn how to ski. This has to be a sport of the people, or it's not going to work. And it doesn't work for Aspen or Jackson either, because no one learns how to ski. And you don't just say, I want to ski, I'll go ski Jackson. That's a disastrous proposition. So the danger really is about a loss of identity and who we are and how we find joy, more than it is that skiing is entirely gone.
Yeah. We have a question that kind of rings along the same thread. Speaking of clean energy, I always feel so guilty driving up to the mountains a few times a week and also trying to advocate for ways to lower emissions. Thoughts on how to lower my impact? Will driving up to the mountains look different in the future?
This is a critical question. So imagine you are the most powerful industry in the history of commerce, the most wealthy fossil fuel industry. And imagine you had created a system that was utterly dependent on your product, on carbon, and that you owned politics, you had captured government and policymaking so that you had locked in dependence on fossil fuels. People would be kind of mad at you, right? Because you were powerful and you did this thing. But what would you want? What would you want people to think? You'd want them to think, I'm guilty. I'm guilty. So what this listener, this caller is saying is, I'm in a system I have no control over, that I had no ability to influence, that evolved over 50 years, and I'm guilty? You're not guilty at all. This idea of hypocrisy that, oh, I drive an SUV, we're all in this together. It's bullshit. And it's exactly playing into the game of the fossil fuel industry. If you want to learn more about this, listen to the podcast Drilled, and Powell will post some stuff on it. Michael Mann, the climate scientist, has written about it. But the answer to the question is, you are not a hypocrite, but you are obligated to be an activist. So give to Powell, participate with Powell, advocate with no sense of hypocrisy, because you can't live in a carbon-free world right now if you wanted to. Your goal is to create that world.
Absolutely. And I think that's something, as an athlete who, by nature of my job, I fly to different areas of the world to ski and to do presentations and et cetera, et cetera. And it's this hypocrisy thing has been thrown at me from left, right, and center on Instagram and social media about how can you be an advocate when you are flying all over the place. But saying that, my environmentalism is better than your environmentalism isn't going to get us anywhere. And that's exactly, Drilled is a great example of where to get more information on that. But yeah, that's been an interesting one for myself to overcome. Do
we have another question?
We have another question, yeah. Someone wants you to talk a little bit more specifically about what Aspen Skiing Company is doing sustainability-wise. It's such a broad term.
Yeah. So, we started doing the conventional things that everyone thought you should do, which is build green buildings, reduce your carbon footprint, build hydroelectric plants, put in solar, and start a foundation. And every time we did that, we said, is that enough? For my entire career, I've understood the climate problem. Sustainability doesn't exist without solving climate. So we do these things, and they were hard and brutal and took me forever to do, and it was never enough. So we said, we did the same thing that I suggested that everyone here do, which is get a 6-pack of beer or soda and say, where's our power? And we said, our power is in our fame, in the people who come here, in the power of the outdoor industry. So the most important work we've done is not what you'd expect of a sustainability guy at a ski resort. An example would be that very early on, I got a call from Jeremy Jones, and he said, do you want to be on the board to Protect Our Winters? And I said, first, what's Protect Our Winters? And then I said, where's the board? I went to the first meeting, and it was like Matt McLean of Surfrider, Jeremy Jones, a woman from Stevens Pass. There was no board. So the point is that Aspen Skiing Company allowed me to work for POW while paying me to work for SkiCo. And I and Jeremy and now all the other people like yourself helped build the organization into a legit international powerhouse. So that's an example. Another example was we said we should have clean power. Well, instead of buying clean power for ourselves, which wouldn't have been enough, we spent 15 years community organizing and changed the entire board of the utility. And now the utility's headed toward 100% clean power. Guess what? That's greening Vail's power too, but that's good. We're happy. We want to do the big thing, not the smaller thing. So this type of political engagement, we still do all the on the ground stuff. And that was what my book was about, was do the on the ground stuff, but keep your eye on the political prize, on the big change prize. We do the little stuff, but we're really focused on the most giant change we can possibly see happen.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And outside of work and outside of everything you do with Aspen Skiing Company, how are you a part of the outdoor state? What do you love doing outdoors?
So I'm a particular character or piece of the outdoor state that is the guy who does it all really badly. And so, for example, I kayak the Grand Canyon in winter. And like all my expeditions, it was a total epic. We ran out of food and people were hoarding chocolate bars in their tents and looking at each other suspiciously. And I've climbed big mountains like Denali. And our team, had a big fight and we had to abandon a guy at 14,000 feet. So I sort of practice disaster style outdoorsmanship.
That's awesome.
But I do it all. I ski, I climb, I hike. And I think I do it all at a mediocre level because I do everything. I haven't specialized.
Yes. I love that. We've got another question. How can we get resorts to ask if visitors to make an emission offset donation when they purchase their pass, book a room, or purchase a meal?
Okay. So my perspective is that that's not what you should be asking your customers to do, because again, this plays into this is your fault, one, and two, offsets are notoriously sketchy and don't actually do the thing that they're supposed to do. And third, it distracts you from the game. So again, a fossil fuel company wants you buying an offset and taking responsibility for the problem instead of boycotting that company, writing the CEO, writing a letter to the editor talking about that. So what I think you should do, and this is what we're trying to do at Aspen, is ask your employees, not your employees, your customers and your guests to be politically active. So we have Protect Our Winners on our uniforms. We are recruiting people into the cause in hotel rooms. Yeah, that pisses a few people off, but we're playing for keeps. We're playing hardball. We're not going to play around and say, buy this offset and you're good. You're not. It's not enough. If we don't solve this issue in the 2020 election, we're going to lose not just climate, but possibly democracy. So that's my answer.
I love that response. You're playing for keeps and you guys aren't afraid to advertise, give a flake, all of these things. You're loud and it makes me a huge fan.
Come visit.
I did. I spent some time out in Aspen this year. And
I know. Actually, I've seen you here. Yeah.
Yeah. We have another question. Which industries outside of the energy sector do you think have the greatest potential to deliver climate solutions, and what will it take for them to shift operations to have a meaningful impact?
Another good question. This is a good group. I think that there are some very influential businesses out there. You know them. There's Google, there's Microsoft, there's Apple, and they suffer from the same strategic error that a lot of the ski resorts do, which is instead of Apple saying, we're gonna go to Washington, the most respected, one of the biggest corporations in the world, and we're gonna go meet with the government, the president and Congress, and say, you have to act on climate. Instead of doing that, they're saying, we're going to buy 100% clean power. That doesn't matter. I'm sorry. We need the head of Google, so respected, so serious a business person, the head of Apple, Tim Cook, Microsoft. We need them to stop focusing on their navels and get politically active. They're doing it a little bit, but they need to be vocal. It needs to be in the Wall Street Journal. And until that happens, other businesses are going to be scared to come along. There's a senator named Sheldon Whitehouse, and he regularly criticizes corporate America. He says, nobody's out there. Nobody is saying we need action on climate. Where are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And guess what today is? It's Giving Tuesday.
Right.
Yes. Huge point. So yeah, what can we do on Giving Tuesday to help support POW?
So I think that our web administrators are going to put something up, but here's the deal. It's really important that an organization like POW have the financial support to do things like send you, Michelle, to Washington, or to hire a writer to do an op-ed, or to try to flip the elections in Colorado and Montana and Maine and Michigan. And even a little bit of money is important, because when you contribute, we also get your contact information and we can help you activate politically. So there's lots of things that you can do. One piece of it is giving a little bit of money. So we'd ask that you give a teeny bit or a lot if you have it. And then just a couple of other action steps. In Utah and in Colorado, there are electric utilities that you can be influencing. Right now in my district, there's an election for the utility. And in Colorado, there's a guy running against Scott Tipton in the primary, and his name's James Iacino, and you could vote for him in the primary and help him win. He could beat Tipton. So there you go.
Yep, you got to get political. You got to raise your voice. And POW has a great roadmap that helps kind of bring you into the fold and helps give you those scripts to write, to call your politicians and your leaders. And I think that's a huge point, that POW is just a good roadmap, a good place to start and help expand your knowledge.
I see another question there, Michelle.
What do we got? Oh, I don't know if we have any questions. Yeah, we're good to go. We're good to wrap it up if we want.
All right.
Yeah. I think we're good, unless there is any other questions. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was a pleasure to talk and learn from you, Auden. I admire you for a very long time and what Aspen's doing and kind of leading the charge. So thank you so much for that.
Well, likewise, Michelle, thank you for this great interview. And do our moderators have anything they need to add?
We need to add that next Thursday, the Outdoor State of Mind will feature Donna Carpenter and Danny Davis, and they're going to be talking on how brands are leading with their values and standing for their communities in order to stay in business, which Burton has certainly been a huge part of that. So I'm excited to tune into that one.
That's a must-see. Donna's amazing, and Danny Davis is amazing. So, and they know each other super well. It should be good chemistry.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And yeah, we'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you all.